Hi y'all, good morning. I'm going to do a video today that I've been looking forward to doing for a long time. It's about how to make the best connections with our bus bars to the welded stud terminals that we're getting on these lithium iron phosphate cells. First, I'll let you know that I've made some big progress around. I got all the construction mess cleaned up from building the building of the solar shed and got some dirt spread and smoothed out, and now I'm taking a break from that project because I'm a little burned out on it and ready to work on batteries again. I also got the ductless mini splits delivered yesterday. That was a big deal because a lot of times these days getting appliances and mechanical equipment like that can take a long time, but I got what I needed delivered yesterday. But I got something delivered yesterday that was more exciting to me. I had what I think is a great idea for how to solve a problem that we think we have with these batteries. So that has to do with the contact area of these terminals. When we use these welded stud terminals, we have this contact area is just this little bitty shelf that the bus bars sit on. And then the bus bars themselves, they have an oval hole, and so the actual contact area you get isn't that great. It's not dramatically different than the cross-sectional area of that bus bar, but it is small. And I've wondered if it really matters because it's only across a tiny little spot. It's not running down a length of a bus bar or a length of a wire, so the sectional area may not be a problem. I've been going with that assumption, but I had an idea. And my idea is these are aluminum washers from the Bolt Depot. And it seems to me that if I use this aluminum washer with a 1/4 inch hole, or 6 millimeters, that makes as much contact on the top of that terminal as possible. And then the bus bar makes big cross-sectional area with that aluminum washer. And the aluminum washer should transfer the energy nicely. But let's test. Oh, I'm going to need my glasses. Because great ideas are only guesses until we test. That's how science works, right? You get a great idea, you make a hypothesis, you set up an experiment, you test. Then you find out whether or not you were right or wrong. And it has to be repeatable. It can't just be that you tested it and it worked. It has to be repeatable. So let's test how much resistance is across this washer. And the first test I'm going to do is a washer that has not been prepared, just straight out of the bag. Oops. Kind of jumping around, isn't it? And that's what I find happens when you're dealing with corrosion, aluminum oxide. So this one, I've sanded both sides to 400. Yeah, no jumping around, 0.00 milliohms. So, aluminum oxide makes a big difference. And it would appear that as long as you prepare the washer, that you're not going to lose a lot of gain a lot of resistance across the thickness of the washer. So this should be a great idea. Let's test it. We're going to start by testing this bus bar. And I'm touching the side of the terminal down below. And I'm testing the top of the bus bar. And I have 0.13. That appears to be a lot of resistance across just that connection. So maybe there's something to this surface area not being adequate. What happens? This terminal is a round hole. So what happens if I touch that terminal and the top of that lug? And I have to be careful not to touch the bottom of the lug, just the terminal. So 0.03. That's not good. I mean, that's not bad. That's so much better than this one. So let's test this again, because I'm going to test it and I'm going to write it down. I've got now I have 0.11. Let's get this cell out of the way. 0.11, and that's on the positive side of, this is positive number 2. This is number 2. Bus bar number 2. Let's see what the negative side does. Oh, 0.19. That's terrible. Why so different? That doesn't seem like it's just cross-sectional area, contact point. Let's see what we got going on here. I'm going to take this apart. Oh wait, before I take it apart, let's measure from one end to the other. One terminal to the other terminal. Wow. That seems like a lot, y'all. 0.49, 0.50? Wow. 0.50. That's big. Let's see what's going on here. Because I have a suspicion about what's going on. And my suspicion is that this bus bar is not flat. If you remember earlier video, when I was preparing bus bars, I wanted to make sure that they were flat. And yeah, look at that. You can see that that's not flat, which means that it's only touching on the outer edges. So when I put this on here, it's touching on this edge and it's touching on this edge. Not good. Now also, you notice when I hook this up, I'm pushing it all the way over because I want it to contact where there's a lot more surface area. So I'm giving it the best chance it has. But it's bent, so it's not performing correctly. Let's see what happens if I take this bus bar. Is it flat? That appears to be flat. Let's see what happens. Wait a minute. Did I see a little bit of... It's actually a little bit curved the other way. That's pretty good. Let's just check this out. All right. And so I've got having a hard time getting on the terminal. I have 0.11. This was the one that was 0.19 over here. And now I have 0.11. And that was 0.50 from end to end. What do we have now? Oh, 0.28. So I can't tell you why those numbers don't add up, because if we just go from the top of the bus bar from terminal to terminal, we get .06. That's what I typically find. 0.06. You know, you can just test any of these bus bars, and from hither to yon, come on, you're gonna get something like, oh, come on, 0.06. I got 0.08 there. The fact that I'm getting a slightly different number makes me want to confirm that these contacts on the tester are clean. I'm just going to use a little bit of alcohol, dab that a little bit, make sure that they're not touching each other, no lint on them. Check that again. Oh, 0.05. Always check and clean and maintain your test equipment. All right, back over here. .04 from end to end. I just measured 0.27 on this. Oh, there it is, 0.27. .28. Yep. All right. So it appears to me that making sure that the bus bars are flat is highly critical. And what really matters is that the contact patch is highly critical. It has always concerned me when people talk about polishing the terminal before they put the bus bars on. How are they doing that? Because if you polish this terminal with sandpaper or a file or something like that, the possibility that you, by hand, can polish that without reshaping it and causing it to be slightly domed, that seems pretty difficult to me. I've done a lot of handwork, and I know that it is very easy to round edges over when you're trying to polish. So, how to do that? Well, this is what I came up with. I took a dowel rod, drilled a 1/4-inch hole in it, straight through the center of it. Wasn't easy. Then I took some 400 grit sandpaper and cut a strip of it. But how to make the hole? Well, I took this little nut driver. You might recognize this. It comes in these little cheapy sets. And I took my Dremel tool. And I took the cone shape and I used the carborundum bit and I shaped the cone shape. And then I ground out the inside to make a knife edge that's just slightly bigger than 1/4 of an inch. And that makes a nice little knife cutting tool. And then, from the back side of the sandpaper, I've got a hole. Now, if I put this over and I hold it up like this, it seems that it's going to be a lot easier, but not foolproof, to be able to do a little bit of polishing without changing the shape, flatness, or angle of the terminal. But I don't want to overdo that because I know that I can still, see, I'm only getting aluminum on one side, so even with this tool, I'm not holding it perfect. And I don't want to reshape that, but I think that this is probably, there we go, this is probably a good method for cleaning that up as best I can. Now, I don't expect that this is going to change anything because I had already done this off camera before. But that's the method I'm going to use to clean the oxide off the aluminum. Because as I showed you with the washer, aluminum oxide is really not good for conductivity. So, in the interest of science, I'm going to put this back on, tighten it back up, and check it one last time. I don't think it's going to have changed. But let's do it, because what I think doesn't matter. What I test does. And the problem we get into is people that do this are very intelligent and they have good ideas. And their good ideas sound convincing, and they can become part of the lexicon. They can become part of the common knowledge of how things should be done. But if they were never tested, we don't know what we're actually getting. And so the same holds true with this retention of these cells, which many people call compression. We think we know. People have different ideas and they argue about what should happen, but they're mostly operating from their interpretation of what the manufacturer says, or their interpretation of what their reason and their rational mind tells them is probably correct. But testing is all that really matters. So I had, let me write this down because I had forgotten to write it down, but on number 2 alternate, I had 0.11, 0.11, and 0.27. Those add up pretty well because the bus bar is 0.05 and that adds up. All right. So I'm getting a higher number now after, quote, cleaning the terminal. Because now I'm getting 0.38. Oh, but look what I've done. I put that crooked bus bar on. And it was reading 0.50 before. And now, after cleaning the terminal, I'm getting a much lower reading. Even though this was the crooked bus bar, so let's put this one on, the flat one, and see what happens with it now that I've cleaned that terminal again. Because we know that the aluminum oxide forms really quickly, and I have cleaned that earlier, but the aluminum oxide can form rather quickly. So this is freshly cleaned terminals. And from terminal to terminal now, wish I was more coordinated for y'all. Get on the terminal, Ray, not on the weld of the terminal. And that's what happens sometimes when I try to test this. I end up on the weld of the terminal instead of the terminal itself. And I get an off reading. So what I'm getting here is 0.28. It really hasn't changed. 0.28, 0.29. So what did I do? When I sanded that terminal, this one actually went up from 0.27 to 0.29. When I sanded that terminal, did I make it change shapes to where it is more closely aligned with this crooked bus bar? And what happens if I just push down on the terminal and help it to shape better to on the bus bar and help it shape better to the terminal? 0.28. All right, now let's try my brilliant idea of putting the washers on. Can we get a better result? Because that's what this is all about, is I have a theory that the washers are going to improve this. But will they? All right. I have two cleaned and sanded washers. Let's just go ahead and freshen that up. 400 grit paper. Drop that on that terminal that was just recently cleaned. Give it all the best chance it has. So I think if the contact area is a problem, the contact area of those terminals is a problem, then we're probably going to have a better result now. But if it's not a problem, we might have a slightly worse result because we're going through another layer, well, 2 more layers of aluminum. 0.24, 0.25. Come on. I have to be careful to touch the terminal and not the washer. Looking for a stable reading. 0.25. Once you get onto the right material where you're not on something that is soiled or something. So 0.25, 0.26. So it appears that I have improved with the washer. I have improved it to 0.25. Let's check each individual end. I had 0.11 before. Come on, baby. 0.06, 0.07. Now, 2 things have happened since I took this reading. I re-cleaned the terminal and I put on the washer. That's not good scientific method. I should have made 1 change at a time, but I'm at 0.07. And over here, so how is it worse on this end now than it was before? We were at 0.11, now 0.15. So I have a feeling that we run a risk when we start polishing these terminals. I think that we need to do that as minimal as we can so that we don't change the shape. I've got 0.14 now. And from one end to the other, I have 0.25. The measurement should be repeatable if I wasn't such a dork about holding the ends. Maybe too much coffee this morning. So we're at like 0.26 7. So it does not appear that the washers have made a big improvement here. But results have to be repeatable. We're going to do it one more time. Let's check this one. So from one end to the other, I have 0.45. This is positive number 2. And on the positive side, we have 0.16, 0.15. We're going to find another curved bus bar. I bet we are. And 0.15 there. Let's clean this up. I wrote this wrong. This is number 4. Thank you, lovely videographer, for pointing out my mistake. All right. I cleaned the terminals just to make sure that I wasn't misreading. I got 0.12, 0.13, and I have 0.15, 0.16, 0.13, 0.16. All right, let's see what we find. Now I want to remind you, as I said in the other video, in another video I did about this subject, the BMS is made by Seplos, and in the instructions, Seplos says that it is important to have low resistance in the bus bars, and they actually test the resistance across this bus bar from 8 positive to 9 negative, and they use that to calibrate the BMS on the assumption that that resistance from one bus bar to the next is the same. So that is why I find it to be important to pay attention to this resistance. Now, I have the conductive carbon paste on here, and we are going to go back and put the carbon paste on this one and see what difference it makes, because all these things matter, and I'm trying to develop the strategy for my final connections so that I can hook them up and not have to worry about them again. And I will be using this carbon paste because it is going to help with preventing aluminum oxide from forming on these connections over time. All right, so is it flat? It is not flat. It is a little bit convex. That fixes that. Now it's straight. And we'll check it again. One change at a time, right? One end to the other. .5. All right. I adjusted the bus bar and I got a worse reading. All right. But I also wiped off the carbon paste. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to get 2 more washers and put them on. It appears to me that the most important thing is that the contact patch be maintained by not having a crooked bus bar or a terminal that has been sanded to clean it and the shape damaged. All right, I'm going to go ahead and clean this terminal and add the washers. I know, 2 things at once, shouldn't do it, but here we go. No, I can't do it. I have to do it one at a time. It's just not good to do 2 things and then you're left guessing as to what made the difference. So here we go. We're going to do this, then we're going to add the washers. It's just good scientific method. All right. .37. And we have 0.11 on this end. And 0.14, 0.13 on this end. Oops. I clean the terminal and I have 0.11, 0.13 and 0.37. So we're going to add the washers now and see what happens. Do the washers make the difference that I think they should make? Or is it other things that matter far more? These washers, by the way, from Bolt Depot were 9 cents a piece in lots of 100. All right. With the washer added, .14, 0.15. Point one. .38. 0.14, 0.10, and 0.38. Again, I'm just not getting an improvement by adding the washer. I get an improvement by cleaning the terminal, even though it's been cleaned before. I get an improvement by cleaning the terminal, but I don't get an improvement by adding the washer. It's just lost within the noise. So, here's my takeaway. And I'm going to continue to test more of these, but I've taken enough of your time showing you what I'm doing. But my takeaway from this is that the things that matter the most are not compromising the contact area. I believe that the contact area with these terminals, as we have them, as we get them with these welded studs, I believe that it is adequate. It makes sense to me that it would be adequate because you don't have, even though the contact area might be slightly smaller than the contact area of the bus bar, I kind of look at it as when you have a valve on a water line and you want the water line, because it's really long, you want the water line to be 2-inch water line so you don't get a lot of resistance in the water line. You don't have to have the valve be 2 inches. It causes disruption in the flow, but it doesn't increase the overall resistance in the system to an amount that matters. I think that this contact area, as long as you are able to utilize that contact patch, it's adequate. That's what I believe. And I believe it because I'm seeing that what really affects the resistance in this connection is whether or not the bus bar is sitting flat on it. And I think that if you sand on that or file on that, you have to be very careful. Use a method like I have here where you're able to actually control the flatness of it, because if you do it in such a way that you're rounding it down, you're only going to contact on the high spot. Carbon paste. I'm sorry, y'all. I have to do the last test. I forgot. We're going to take these apart. We have the measurements for each of these. We're going to take them apart and we're going to add carbon paste and see if that helps. I know that it will help with the future corrosion potential. But I have seen on bad connections where it actually can help the conductivity. So here's my paste. I use a Q-tip and I take most of the swab off the end because it just ends up being a mess. So you can put it on the washer, but you got to be awfully careful to not get it on your fingers. Ugh. Yep, that's right. I'm uncoordinated. Guess that's why I have to wear glasses and gloves. Oh, didn't put my gloves back on. Dang it. Probably already have comments on the video. Worked with gloves all morning long, and I took them off just before I started the video and didn't put them on. Silly man. All right. I'm going to put the paste here. Because if I try to put it on the top of that washer, it's going to be very difficult for me. All right. I want to thank my lovely videographer. While I'm making this last assembly, I want to explain why the terminals, the contact point where I tapped in these new copper bus bars, why is it off center? And the reason is that the distance between here and here is smaller than the distance between here and the center, and I'm trying to get the sensing wires to read from the positive terminal the same on all of them. Does it matter? Aim small, miss small. I think that if we always try to aim at perfection, our misses will be closer to the bullseye. We can't control everything, but the things we can control, we should try to control. All right, last test. With the carbon paste and cleaning the terminals and using the washers, we have .27. We have come on, Dorcas. All right, let me clean my terminals as I'm getting an off reading. And I am now getting a higher reading than I was before I put the carbon paste on. I cannot explain that. So now I'm getting 0.48 on this terminal. I'm going to take this back apart and figure out what the reason for that is. This one is giving me the same reading I was getting before. With the carbon paste, I went to 0.27. So again, what seems to matter isn't the contact area of these terminals. Maybe the washers help, but I don't think that they do. That's good news. That means I don't have to go through and use washers on all of these. I believe that what I'm going to do is make sure that the terminals are clean. I'm going to use the carbon paste to make sure that we don't end up with corrosion out down the line. And I'm going to make sure that the bus bars are clean, but are flat. But I am also going to test each connection and make sure I don't have a dramatically off number. And if I do, I'm going to correct it, because once these are built, I don't want to fool with them again. Thank you for your time. This was a long video. The results were not what I expected. I thought the washers were going to have a dramatic impact, but it appears that the concerns we have about the size of that terminal are unfounded. It seems like it would be a problem. I believed it was a problem. Testing says that's not actually the issue. Thank you for your time. See you on the next video.